Jambo karibu everybody, Jambo karibu, Jambo to you all. My name is Dr. Ruth Butemamo Akumbu. I am the host of Jambo Dr. Akumbu, bringing you cultural relevant multifaceted conversations and reflections intersecting education, entertainment, and business, committed to DEIB and cultural capacity building. Today, I will be reflecting on CRT or CRT. During my dissertation, I was faced with the challenge of which CRT I'm talking about. And I couldn't use the acronym CRT in my paper. And I chose not to because it was unnecessary to create any tension that was going to hinder the work that I was trying to do. So I had to state clearly in my dissertation when I discussed theories, what theory, which CRT I was talking about. And for those of you who know and who do not know, for those of you who know and who do not know, CRT stands for two things in the education sector as far as theories are concerned, and is culturally relevant teaching and critical race theory. Ooh, I said it, critical race theory. Yes, that word. Those words are the words that have been giving a lot of chills down people's spine lately. It's the other boogeyman of education, critical race theory. So cultural relevant education and critical race theories are theories that have been around for over 10 years. It might seem like it is something new because we are now talking about it, politicizing it, but before that, it was always there and it was used, and it wasn't an issue until when the politicians got a hand on it and it spiraled out of control. So just wanted to make that clear as I dive in. I'm going to use cultural relevant education and cultural relevant teaching interchangeably. So when I'm talking about cultural relevant education, I'm simply reflecting to the theory of cultural relevant teaching. So do not be confused by that. I use cultural relevant education a lot in my dissertation, and I think it still comes out naturally for me to say cultural relevant education instead of focusing on the theory of teaching, which is teaching in education, which is cultural relevant education. So I am going to use those two interchangeably. So I would start by defining critical race theory and cultural relevant teaching as I have it in my dissertation. So I'll read a few quotes from my dissertation just to help you have a general idea of where my head is as I reflect on these issues in society. Jambo, everybody, and I'm excited. Let's dive in. Cultural relevant teaching provides a method for structuring education. Meanwhile, critical race theory discusses the impact of racism in society and institutions and how it impacts people of color. So let me read that again. Cultural relevant education provides a method for structuring education. Meanwhile, critical race theory discusses the impact of racism in society and institutions and how it impacts people of color. So cultural relevant education uses concepts of sociology and social psychology to examine the fundamental of individual interactions and how these interactions, big or small, are impacted by the structures they create. Even intangible characteristics of a society, such as beliefs or culture at large, of various groups within it, could significantly impact the future of that society. Culture, therefore, is a critical factor in the positioning of individuals in society. A lack of cultural understanding can therefore become a disability in some societies. In studying human development, systems, or relationships in society, local or formal education plays a significant role in defining society. This, in my opinion, is one of the reasons why cultural relevant teaching is very important when we teach in classroom, in trainings, whatever has to do with teaching and education in a multicultural setting. It is very important to consider cultural relevant teaching. So critical race theory also is important. Again, because we look at things in society from a race standpoint. Even in our forms that we fill out, we have to state, not sometimes compulsory, but we do state in these things what race we are. Why do we state them if it's not important to study looking at, to study whatever we're collecting data upon based on race? And if you are in higher education and you're pushing critical race theory out of the door, then maybe we as a society should start eliminating any differences that are, any definitions of our differences that are race-based. So if we cannot look at what's happening in society critically based on race, which to me is what critical race theory is, then there is no need for us to have racial divides in our society. There's no need for us to continue to use the label black, white, yellow, brown. There's no need for us to continue to use those terms if we cannot look at things in society critically from that standpoint. I'm going to now share a small story that really made race conversation impactful to me. In a discussion situation with a group, one person who I have to say is white was explaining how another white group had oppressed a non-white group. They were extremely passionate about all the injustices that were caused by this white group upon this other indigenous group. And another person of color chips in and says, oh, that is why I like critical race theory, because it helps us to really look at things from a critical standpoint like this. And the other person, because of the controversy that surrounds critical race theory, basically was not happy that what they were saying was attached to critical race theory. So I was in a position now to try and explain to this other white person that critical race theory is basically what she was doing for this other tribe. She was looking at this tribe or this group of people that were marginalized, that were oppressed, and saying, oh, these people are being oppressed because these people were, their land was stolen, their families were killed, all these things that were being done. to these people. And that is why these people are struggling today. And even today, these people are still struggling and trying to fight for their land and trying to fight for what belongs to them. So I'm trying to let her see that she is basically applying critical race theory because she is looking at this group of people and the struggles they're going through from a race place. She's coming from the perspective of race. She's not just looking at it as human injustice, but she's looking at it as in one group continuously oppressing another group that does not look like them. And what the other person in the group was saying is that that's the same thing that happened to Black people with slavery, with maybe not getting, with slavery, with school desegregation and other things that happened to Black people. And this person would not hear it. Well, I hope they heard it when I explained it. But it was something that, just like I shied away from using it in my dissertation, or just like I had to clearly explain in my dissertation that I wasn't talking about critical race theory. And to be honest, I couldn't really use critical race theory in my paper because I was trying to push cultural relevant education, cultural integrity. So in education, cultural relevance in education. So not just looking at a tribe that is, or a group that is situated within groups. I'm looking at a group with people that look the same. They all look the same, but there are divergences in their culture. There are differences in their culture, right? So there is, say this tribe in Kenya that I was looking at. Kenya is a Black country, and the people are all Black. They have over 40 tribes, so about 42 tribes and languages. So that is listed. So I couldn't really use critical race theory in Kenya because there are not a significant difference in the skin color of the people that are in Kenya. So cultural relevant education applied in my context better. Now, coming back to the United States with critical race theory, we live in a country that is extremely diverse. We are at least 50% diverse or heterogeneous community. So it's hard to say that you're going to teach in a classroom without applying some degree of critical race theory, especially when you're dealing with subjects like history that talks about our past, or if you're dealing with political science, it's very difficult not to talk about that. Even when you're dealing with leadership, it's difficult not to talk about injustices that belong in high levels of society, on leadership positions in society. So I think what I find the most challenging is when critical race theory is being pushed out of higher ed. If we cannot, especially at the highest level of education, discuss complex theories that impact our society, where are we going to have the freedom to discuss these things? Education or schools are the place where we're supposed to actually have a diversity of thought and debate. Once we debate upon the controversial topics in our society freely debate upon it with respect for each other's opinion, that is when we can create a common understanding or understand where somebody is coming from and know that this is not an intention to demonize another group. It is the goal should be to look at this other group and say, okay, how is my group being treated in society? Maybe this is one of the reasons why in the lower level there is a lot of complaint that critical thinking is it's diminishing from our society. We are not thinking critically anymore. But let's think about it though. The group of people that are pushing back on critical race theory, who are they and why are they pushing back? Let's think about it for a minute. Say, for instance, I'm a black person to begin with, but let's take, for example, I am a white person. And I decide that I don't want to hear about critical race theory because it's making my children feel bad, it's making me feel bad, or whatever excuse I give because I don't want to hear about critical race theory. Forget about the division that some people say, oh, it's divisive. That's not a reason not to have a conversation. We just need to be respectful when we have conversation. But if I'm saying that, giving reasons why not having that, why critical race theory is not good for me, am I not in turn practicing critical race theory? I am looking at that theory critically and thinking, this is how this theory disadvantages me in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ways, or even more. If I am capable as a white person to tell you why this particular theory is disadvantageous to me, or how it marginalizes me, or how it makes me feel unworthy or bad or sad or anything, it means I have critically thought about why that theory is not good for me. And in turn, I have practiced critical race theory. So the misconception that critical race theory is only for Black people or people of color or indigenous peoples needs to be corrected. And I hope by bringing this point up, I am helping correct that misconception. Critical race theory is for everybody. And white people, Black people, people of color, all practice critical race theory. Whether you like it or not, you practice critical race theory. Because the reason why you are fighting so hard to push back on it is not because you want all of us to hold hands and sing Kumbaya. That's not why. You're doing it because you're trying to protect your own. You're doing it because you think there is an injustice that will befall you if this theory is continuously used in the classroom. You're not doing it because you love everybody and you just want everybody to be happy-go-lucky. No, I don't think so. You're doing it because you're thinking critically about your own. And that is the beauty. The beauty of critical race theory is for you to think at things from a race standpoint critically. Think at it. Think about it. For anything you're concerned about, think about it from a race standpoint critically. Okay, I feel like I just got really superheated. Again, going back to the story of the group discussions that I was having with a couple of people, it ended up civil. It wasn't necessary not go on civil, but it erupted some emotions, and because we went through that, there was growth pain. There was growth pain. So for me, pushing away critical race theory, especially in higher education, I don't think it's right. I don't think it's right, because we at that level are supposed to think critically about things. We're supposed to debate things. We're supposed to have different opinions on things and then talk about it and create a common ground. But if we refuse to do those things, if we refuse to look at things critically, if we refuse to look at life and society from a critical standpoint, then won't one group continue to push their beliefs, their way of thinking on another group, even if it is detrimental to the other group? If you cannot hear my perspective, the way I feel about something else, then are you not therefore trying to marginalize me? If my opinion does not count, if how I feel about something does not count, then are you therefore not doing exactly what society is accusing you of doing? If you're a white person and you're saying that you don't want Black people, people of color, to talk about their issues that impact them from a race standpoint, then are you not continuing to perpetuate the culture of oppression that is being discussed by looking at race critically? Let's reflect on these things. So, while you think about it and reflect on it, let's dive into culture a little bit more. So, as I was saying, the United States is at least 45 to 50% multicultural or heterogeneous. And as a multicultural society, it is really, really hard to not think about the different cultures that make up the society. I have mentioned my experiences in the entertainment industry before and noted that for a very long time, I never really saw representation. And now, yes, there is a lot more representation. When I turn on a TV show, I see more Black people. I see a more of a representation of America than I saw in 2010, maybe, or 2006. So we have come some ways, but we cannot say that we cannot continue to grow and improve. We cannot say that we're going to take out books from schools that deal with thinking critically about something else. Isn't that what schools are for? For a safe ground for people to think and reflect and disagree? Shouldn't these disagreements about theory be conducted in higher education, doctoral level, master degree levels? Shouldn't these discussions and disagreements and debates be done at the higher institutions rather than by politicians? I love it when I see parents that go to schools, to these board meetings, and they're talking about all the things related to critical race theory. I love it. Like, I'm one of those people that I'm like, go parent, because it means that parent is thinking critically about what their child is learning. As a society, we need to promote critical thinking. Where I find a challenge is some parents follow what politicians say about a topic they don't really know about. And they get people all emotional and excited. And people start following a trend that is not even well explained by the politician. So we cannot be talking about a theory and not really understanding what that theory is saying, and then just pushing that theory out the door. How can we teach without looking at the different people groups in our society and the issues that concern them? A parent in the board meeting, or a white parent in the board meeting pushing back about critical race theory, is basically thinking critically about how talking about the past makes them feel or makes their child feel. It's about how they feel. It's not about thinking critically about how what happened in the past impacts society today, or what might be happening in that boardroom and how it would impact society in the future. For instance, if you take a very extreme point, a position on critical race theory, and everybody in that society and in that board meeting supports you. Now, what happens when the demographics change and you are now in the minority? Are you going to expect somebody to hear you out? Are you going to expect somebody else to listen to your concerns? So what you're doing today, do you want others to do that unto you when it's their turn to be in a position to make change? I feel like sometimes as a society, or I think that sometimes as a society, we forget that the position we're in can change and somebody else is going to be in that position. The world in general is changing, and we cannot keep refusing to think critically about things. We just cannot afford to not think critically about things, whether they're things from the past, things of the present, or things that will impact the future. Like I always say, our past informs our present, and our present determines our future. So thinking critically about things is super important, very important to me. I believe it's very important to our society in general. Now let's go back to culture. Why I love culture so much when it comes to a society like the United States with a lot of racial tension is that one of the reasons why maybe I am thinking out loud here. One of the reasons why I believe or I think that maybe the white group of people that push against critical race theory are concerned is because they think that their culture is going to be replaced. or their voices are not going to be heard when it comes to making educational decisions, political decisions, social decisions, that, or whatever decisions that are being made, that they're being left out. Their culture is being left out. So cultural relevant teaching, therefore, it's important because when you are looking at education from a cultural standpoint, all the cultures are considered. It's very inclusive. All the cultures are considered. So if you're a white evangelical and somebody else is agnostic or an atheist, the thinking, there's a diversity in thinking within these groups that I have mentioned. And you could break down that diversity in thinking based on culture. What do they believe? What do they value? And why? What are the norms and why? So once we start looking at people as a tapestry, we lay all our people groups on a tapestry, and we look at the different groups from a cultural standpoint, which when I say culture, I means belief, values, norms, practices, their history, and their traditions, which ties into the norms and the practices, right? So when we start looking at people, all people from that point of view, the different people groups in our society from that point of view, then we can start building a common ground. Instead of insisting that white evangelical culture is the United States culture in a society that is at about 50% heterogeneous, I don't think that will work. You cannot insist that your culture is the dominant and the only culture in a society where it is extremely heterogeneous, culture-wise, people-wise. So I love culture because I personally believe that a lot of these disagreements we have in society can be mediated if we bring in a cultural perspective of looking at everything. If you apply critical race theory, how can you apply critical race theory with a culture of diversity of thinking? How can you apply critical race theory with looking at the different people groups and each one of them being studied equally? So you're not going to marginalize one culture over the other. You're going to look at them fairly, critically, without throwing out one group or the other. So let's not just be quick to throw out ideas. Let's be quick to say, from my perspective, this is what I see, and understand from your perspective, this is what you see. Can I see your perspective and can you see my perspective? And if we can see each other's perspectives, how can we move forward with the different perspectives that we have? How can we move forward as a country with the different cultural ways of behaving, thinking, believing? I think for me, that is why I am so passionate about cultural relevant teaching or cultural relevant education, because I know that we are a diverse group of people. Even in the same house, people have diverse ways of thinking, diverse ways of approaching things, diverse ways of behaving. And people embrace different cultures. So we need to be able as a society to think critically and to respect diversity in thinking. Otherwise, we're just going to keep doing injustice to our society. Everything should not be an attack on the other. There are some things that is just a difference of opinion, and we just have to come back to the drawing board, to the tapestry, and find a way forward. Using power to usurp somebody that doesn't have power. Using power to oppress somebody else's ideas and thoughts is a chain reaction, is a behavior that will only land us in more hot waters down the road when that oppressed person finally gets power. I'm not saying that when oppressed people get power, they're going to eventually try to attack the group that oppressed them. I'm just saying that we need to be careful when we use our power to suppress. We need to be careful when we use our power to suppress. We need to disagree respectfully and find a way forward. Even when we disagree, we have to learn to agree on one or two things that can help us move forward. We can't keep on drawing these hard lines in the sand that are hurting us as a people more than improving us as a people. So, if you're interested in learning about my approach to cultural relevant teaching, cultural relevant businesses, cultural relevant education, building a culture of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in a way that looks at the tapestry and not just one group, then please contact me. The details are in the description. We need, as a society, to start taking everyone into consideration and taking diversity of thought into consideration from all groups, Black, white, male, female, and all groups. We need to find a common ground to work, to live, to excel. So that is the new trajectory that I'm seeing. So we have moved from a place of affirmative action, and we are moving to a place that is inclusive of everybody, which for me, it's why I look at DEIB in companies as in, how can we build a DEIB culture? Because I think that if we are going to be inclusive of everybody, then we have to approach this from a cultural perspective. We have to approach belonging in the DEIB acronyms from a place of culture. That way, it doesn't end with just the minority groups. It includes everybody in the company, in the institution, in the country, that allows everyone's culture to be considered. Whether you're a white evangelical or you're an atheist, how can we help you belong, feel like you belong? By looking at what you believe, your beliefs, your values, your norms and your traditions. That is why I'm now working on a training that looks at that focuses on building a DEIB culture, or creating a culture of DEIB for a company that have not conceptualized it the way I am suggesting. And for those that have already started to conceptualize it, I can equally help facilitate that you have a culture, a DEIB culture. I can help facilitate that you have a DEIB culture that is inclusive of all the voices in your company. Yes, including white men, which is the group that many argue are being hurt or are being left out. Not left out because this was never really created for white men, are being unconsciously oppressed. And yes, including white men. Maybe we should leave all the others out, just inclusive of everybody. We have a long way ahead. And we need to have the awareness of what things really mean. We need to have the desire to know and see other people's perspective and respect them, and find a way to work together moving forward, instead of getting in this unnecessary, unhealthy arguments and divisions that are unnecessary. Like the arguments are unnecessary. Like, let the people in higher education fight it out when it comes to theory. But when it comes to us living our daily lives, let's find common ground. Politicians need to find common grounds instead of continue to perpetuate division. If you serve people, you serve all people in your county, in your state, in your country. You don't just serve one group of people, you serve everybody. So let's find a common ground. And if you want to know how, reach out to me. The details are in the description box. Please do share this episode. And if you want to be a guest on my episode, description box. All the details are in there. Contact me. If you want to sponsor an episode, reach out to me with your ideas and what you are so proud of that you want the world to know about. And if we align, I would definitely help promote your product. I would definitely bring you on the podcast to talk about those ideas. Until then, asante sana.